Hello everyone! So for our second video on the lecture on sports tourism development process, we'll take a step back on sports tourism for a while and let's just talk about tourism planning in general. And we're going to contextualize it in the Philippines because we're going to study about how we do tourism planning based on the Department of Tourism LGU guide. So just like what I just said, this lecture is based on the Tourism Guidebook for local government units that was made by the Department of Tourism, Department of Interior and Local Government, the Department of Environment and Natural Resources in partnership with the Development Association of the Philippines. So basically, tourism planning in the Philippines is also very much helped by the local government units. And based on the Republic Act 7160, tourism development and promotion are among one of the functions of LGUs. And also in the Tourism Development Act or the RA 9593, LGU should prepare and implement a tourism development plan for their locality, enforce the standards, and also collect statistical data for tourism purposes that basically will be submitted to regional and national offices so that we will have sufficient monitoring and evaluation of the overall tourism state of the country. So before we move on to the process that is suggested by the Tourism Guidebook in terms of tourism planning for local government units, let's discuss first some of the important terms that were mentioned in this guidebook. And the first one is the tourism site. Basically, tourism site talks about a single attraction that is found in a certain local government unit. And of course, in relation to sports tourism, that attraction should either be a sports event or a sports-related venue or destination. Like for example, a playing field, a stadium, or a nostalgia sports museum. And then also, it's important that we just don't develop sites, but we also develop them in tandem with other related attractions and other parts of the sectors. And this one, the set of related attractions that go together are called tourism development clusters. So these are sets of different attractions that are either geographically proximate to each other or are related to each other in relation to theme. No? And next we have tourism development areas. So these are the set of attractions, which are the clusters, plus the tourism systems or the sectors that are proximate to or geographically located together with the attractions in a given local government unit. So kasama na dito yung mga transport systems and the accommodations, the hotels, etc. that basically has something to do with the overall tourism systems in a given LGU. So as we mentioned earlier, in terms of the development process in relation to tourism and also in sports, it's important that all stakeholders are present in order to, give their suggestions, recommendations, and also give their feedback in relation to what is being developed. So in terms of the local government units, each local government unit, from a barangay to a city, town, regional, and country level, we have what we call your local tourism councils. And your local tourism councils, basically what they do is, one, they formulate the programs and recommendations to develop local tourism facilities and attractions, tapping local resources and funds, assist in regulation and supervision of tourism-oriented establishments, thereby ensuring wholesome and clean tourism activities in the area. Next is assist in monitoring and implementation of the LGC or the Local Government Council on the matter of licensing and tourism establishments in the locality to ascertain safe and enjoyable stay of travelers. So basically, the tourism attractions and, for example, the accommodations, the restaurants that are involved in this tourism system must also be accredited by the DOT. So it's also important to take note of these things, that in order for a certain establishment to take in tourists, it has to have some sort of accreditation or certification from the Department of Tourism through the LGC. And then next, strictly enforce sanitary standards in public restrooms frequented by public utility vehicles and tourist transport services and gasoline stations, restaurants, among highway and bus stops. So again, because we're talking about a touristic system, so we also talk about transport systems. And like I said, no, in earlier, the partners who are working on this guidebook also include the DENR. So that's why sanitation and environmental awareness and care is included in the activities of the stakeholders as a part of the local tourism councils. So these are all the members of the local tourism council, no? So you have, and of course you have the main people like in the executive sector. You also have those who are related to tourism, related to land planning. You also have agricultural people. You have women and people's organization. You have other NGOs related to tourism. You have the barangay captains of barangays within tourism attractions, if you're looking at this from a municipality or city level. The academe also, and you also have the regional tourism office, and then of course representatives from the local offices of the following departments: DENR, DILG, and of course PNP also for safety, DRRMC for related to any type of disasters that may happen in that area, and the protected area superintendent, no, especially for indigenous peoples. And then you also have other sectoral representatives that are deemed important by the LGU offices. So in the tourism guidebook, it's important to begin the whole tourism planning process by preparing a work plan. And the activities there are conducting tourism training to all stakeholders, especially those who may not be well versed in terms of the roles of tourism and how tourism is done, no? And then data gathering, site attraction and evaluation. We'll go through this later. Situational analysis, planning workshop, vision setting, identification of programs, projects, and activities related to the strategies, prioritization of the PPAs, and packaging and of the developed tourism plan. And according to Tourism Guidebook by the DOT, here are the 5 steps in tourism planning. First is we analyze the situation, formulate goals and objectives, develop strategies, identify programs, and develop a monitoring and evaluation strategy. Just so you know, for this video, I won't be getting into the nitty-gritty of how this is done, because again, this is not really you're not taking a tourism degree, this is just a specialized course for sports tourism. So I'm just going to talk to you about the general philosophy behind and the general methods that they use in order to do these steps. So first we have the analyze the situation. So the guide question in relation to this first step of tourism planning is, what is the tourism situation in that given locality at the certain time? So in analyzing the situation, the LGU, Local Tourism Council, can do a site evaluation. Basically, they look at possible tourism attractions that can be found in their locality. And probably one of these attractions could be related to sports, no? So what are the indicators or the parameters that we use in order to measure or to be able to characterize or qualify these sites? The first one is uniqueness and natural beauty. Remember, this is talking about any type of attraction, whether that's a cultural attraction, that's a heritage attraction, a nature attraction, or sports attraction, shopping attraction, no, gastronomic attraction. So we're looking at all types of tourism here first. So aside from uniqueness and natural beauty, another criteria is historical and cultural value, accessibility of the possible attraction, because again, in order for us to be able to say that it is a tourism attraction, there should be it should be accessible by transport, and there should be internal transport system that is going around that attraction. Availability of basic facilities such as water, electricity, availability of on-site facilities in relation to tourism, like yun nga, transports, establishments, concessionaires, ownership of the property. Aba, syempre ito, we cannot just say na I'm living in near a mansion, and we can just say let's say that this mansion is going to be our next tourism attraction. Abay, kung ito ay private property, you have to ask permission to the one who owns that private property whether we can, plan a tourism experience or a product in relation to that owned land. No, that's the same thing also for sports related destination. Like for example, there is a football field, or a museum, and then it's owned by a private person, di ba? So in order for us to be able to access that and maximize its potential as a tourism site or attraction, we have to include the owner of that person in the conversation, in the decision making table, including them in the stakeholders planning for this. But of course, it's much easier if this is a public entity, And then, of course, the quality of the surroundings, and we just don't talk about the attraction, but we also talk about a lot of what is the geographic area where it is found, Marami bang slums, mahirap bang puntahan, so those kinds of criteria. So the DILG DOT Tourism Guidebook also includes worksheets, and basically these are the sub-criteria and indicators per criterion. And then usually in the meeting, in the tourism planning, while they're analyzing the situation, doing site evaluation, they make use of this and basically answer, 1 to 5, 5 being the best indicator and 1 being not so good in terms of that indicator. And then based on the scores, the overall scores that they will be able to get per indicator, each site will be prioritized in that LGU. So that, of course, we will put our efforts more on those sites that could be prioritized or has more potential to become a developed tourist attraction. And then after that, as a part of analyzing the current situation, is problem identification. For the main tourism attraction that they wish to develop that were prioritized, what could be the problems or the current problems that are already found there? So for example, in this example, in Pamilacan Islands in Bohol, there are many components that they were looking at. Probably they could also use the indicators from earlier as component problems, and then they were able to identify the problems and issues. Remember, identifying the problems and issues for a specific tourism attraction or tourism site or tourism cluster will be basically important because these are what our vision and what our strategies will target when we already are in that part of the development process. And then after identifying the problems for every site and every cluster, the team will do a problem analysis using a cause and effect tree. For example, the cause of the problem is the destruction of primary tourism resource, which is coral reefs. They look for the cause. So what are the causes for the destruction of coral reefs? Careless boating, snorkeling and diving, algal bloom, destructive fishing, poor fishing practice like muroami, pollution from solid waste, and pollution from liquid waste. And because there is destruction of the coral reefs, which maybe is one of the attractions in that site or one of the tourism experiences available in that site, that would have caused decreased tourism arrivals. So, the conduct of doing a problem tree analysis would be important so that the participants would know, or the tourism board would know, what strategies will be able to do in order to address, the problems, and of course, take care of the effect, which is, decreased tourism arrivals. Step number 2. So we now know the situation, we know the available sites, how they are, what are the problems, and why the problems are existing. We now go to step number 2, which is formulating goals and objectives. So what are the questions, general questions being asked in the formulation of goals and objectives? First, what do you want to achieve for tourism in your locality in the future? And addressing the problems, and when do we want to achieve this? So important in all types of goal and objective setting is to be smart. So, what does SMART mean? S means specific, M means measurable, A means attainable, R means realistic, and T means time-bound. So, as we said, no, based on the problems and the potentials that were identified from the previous step, the team will now identify sector goals and objective. So basically, the goal is the long-term achievement that the team wants to have for the locality, and objectives are the more short-term ones and more measurable and short-term, and more specific ones. So, and then after setting up the goals, or basically the general and specific visions of where we want to take tourism in a specific site, in order for us to be able to measure whether we've reached them, we have to take and to set targets. Targets. For example, in this case, the goal is to increase income of host community. So how do we know that we've achieved it? If there has been 50% increase from the baseline when this tourism plan was done, and up to 2022. And then, of course, also setting up success indicators, more specific and more long-term and impact related indicators of whether we have reached the goals. For example, in this case, average household income of host community. So basically, this exercise makes the team think about what is the vision, how do we know that we are already there, and what are the means for us to be able to monitor in the future whether or not we've set our or we've achieved these goals and visions. Next, step number 3 is, once we know the vision, once we have goals, once we have objectives, and we've set measurable success indicators, we will now do number 3, develop strategies in order for us to be able to achieve the specific tourism goals and objectives. So, what are the guide questions? What paths do we take? How do you get from the present tourism situation to the future state that the certain LGU desires? So, in tourism, there are general strategies that could be taken by these LGUs in order to improve their tourism state. One would be price-based strategy. Price-based strategy meaning making the prices of the tourism experience, attractions, and whatever expenditures lower compared to their competitors. Next would be a differentiation strategy. A differentiation strategy is trying to see what programs, what tourism products could be made that is different from those that are geographically proximate to the LGU of interest. Like for example, we already have what we call a one town, one product strategy in regional areas or in provincial areas. For instance, for the town of Villasis in Pangasinan, their product would be vegetables. For Dagupan, their product would be bangus and bagoong. So having that differentiation would basically lead tourists and of course merchants to be able to go to a specific product that they want to achieve. Next, we have hybrid strategies. Hybrid strategy means they combine both price-based and differentiation strategy in relation to achieving the goals. Another strategy to improve tourism in an LGU is to do a focus strategy. When I say focus strategy, ayun nga, being able to set up a specific tourism brand or a destination brand for their specific LGU. And finally, which is also one of the better strategies for tourism, is to develop tourism clusters. It's like identifying all of the tourism attractions that are proximate to each other. Like for example, when you talk about Bohol, diba? You are going to connect all of the tourism attractions that are close to each other. Like for example, Lobok River with all of the historic churches and the waterfalls and the hanging bridge. And then you put them together and plan a specific clustered tourism package that you can offer to tourists so that they will be more enticed to go to that specific destination, because for them, instead of me just spending one day on one destination or one attraction, this specific package already presents a cluster of attractions that can, I can go to point A, point B, point C, and experience more in a day compared to just going one attraction. So instead of just going to one tourism site, we identify tourism clusters. And then probably in your leadership courses, you've already heard about the SWOT analysis, for example, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And we also do that for tourism development in order to improve the tourism state in an LGU. So after the team or the stakeholders have agreed upon a strategy that will help them achieve the vision, they will now break down the strategy into identifiable and executable programs, projects, and activities. So in order to implement the strategies, what programs, projects, and activities will we do? So now, we will connect the programs, projects, and activities with the goals and objectives, which are also connected to the strategy. So, just like any form of proper leadership management and planning, usually we connect our goals with our actions. So in this case, if the goal is to increase income for the host island communities, one objective to be able to reach that is to improve the tourism skills of the people in that island community. Now, how do we improve their tourism skills? We develop community-based ecotourism packages for small islands, so that they will, and then in that they will be trained how to manage tourism activities. And then what would be the programs, projects, and activities that could be done in relation to this? One could be tourism planning, which they are now doing. Product development workshop, so that they will be able to make souvenirs, products. Tour guiding seminar for locals who would like to do tour guiding, and pilot testing of the products that they were able to develop, and then also teaching them how to market it, how to price, right, and also setting up branding, etc., etc. So this basically the goal here is to be able to connect and realize the goals by creating executable and realistic programs, projects, and activities that the local government unit and its dwellers and stakeholders could do in order to improve the tourism state of their area. And then the last step would be to develop a monitoring and evaluation strategy. So now you have set the goals. You have matched the goals and your vision with strategies. And your strategies were translated into executable and realistic projects, programs, and activities. So how do you know if you're doing great and if you need to recalibrate your activities in order to see that you are achieving the goals that you have set within a specific period of time? Usually when we make developmental plans like this, a mid-term development plan is around 3 years and a full-term development plan is up to 5 to 6 years. So that's how we set your goals. So we set it for 3 years up to 5 or 6 years. And basically, it's important that while we are going along the execution of the programs, the projects, and the activities, there should be a monitoring scheme that must be applied so that we know if we are heading the right direction or we need to modify some of our current activities in order to put us back in the direction of achieving the goals. So again, we will connect our monitoring and evaluation scheme with our overall goals. If you notice, most of the worksheets, ini-include yung goals and objectives because again, it's important to never lose sight of the goals and objectives that you have in the tourism development plan and connect them with the other activities that you do along the way so that you know that the activities that are being done and are being recommended are really geared towards setting that goal. So again, also we go back to, including how do we measure success and what are the targets for that indicator. And then for the specific new data that you have to put for the monitoring and evaluation scheme, you have to put where will you get the information for your monitoring, how will you collect the data, so in this case, documents review, how often in the development cycle will you collect the data, so in this case every 3 years, and who is the person responsible to do that monitoring, so in this case the local planning and development office and the tourism office. So again, the process that we take to monitor and evaluate our programs are still connected with the goals and objectives. So in this video, we were able to lightly scratch the surface on the tourism planning done in LGUs based on the tourism guidebook that was done by the DOT, DILG, DENR, and DAP. So we were acquainted with the different steps of tourism planning that is done by the local tourism council and other stakeholders of tourism in a given LGU. I said that we just lightly scratched this subject because the whole tourism development planning is a whole course in the tourism degree program, and we are just discussing it in a small video like this. That's why I wasn't able to give as much substantial examples and as much comprehensive explanation for each step. But of course, like I said, I would like you to access your old learnings on leadership and management and strategic planning so that you will be refreshed with some of the concepts that were put out here today, because it's not very far from that. It's actually based from that. So in this video, we were able to learn about the different steps involved in the tourism planning process at the LGU level. And I will be providing you with the tourism guidebook in the modules if you want to learn more about the contents.